Hello, my name is Christian SERY-BLE, and I am the president of Smyrna Africa and SERY-BLE International. Today I would like to speak to you about the creation of the African Institute for Epidemiological and Mental Hygiene Research. At the national level, it will be called the National Institute of Epidemiological and Mental Health or Mental Hygiene Research. This institution would be helpful in providing African countries the tools to handle the long-lasting problem that has been troubling the society, civilization, the people of Africa. Because over the past 50 years, African countries have been through a lot of turmoils owing to the recurrence of wars and so forth. So, Myanmar would be a venue to create many jobs as well as to conduct research in the area of mental health, for the preservation of peace, solidarity, and cohesion. Because after each war, there are no major thing done to help the people who have been suffering, who have been victimized by the war. So we'll talk about the consequences of the war in Côte d'Ivoire as a model. And the risk of exposure are great. Just as in the case of substance or environmental pollutants, the targets are the skin, the eyes, the brain, the bones. Most of the organs are also targets, and the physiological system is also targeted. The children are even more vulnerable because of their fragility. Their reproductive system is targeted also, and the genes, enzyme, proteins, other proteins, hormones, organelle, as well as the cerebral and cellular transduction system is affected. Why am I speaking about this? Is because we have to do everything to preserve, to offer a better life to the next generation, because the consequences are so diverse. They can lead to social consequences, including self-esteem, low self-esteem, with poor physical, intellectual, and sexual performances as the children grow, and social integration is not always obvious. This situation can lead to delinquency for some people who are not lucky enough to be in the right family. So the list is not exhaustive, but whenever there's been a war in a country, there's been a lot of collateral damages that was not taken care of by the UN and by the country and by other stakeholders of peace. You see here, this young woman's face has been shattered. What is she going to be? The economical consequences are also pronounced. The productivity and quality of the work of the people depend on their well-being, and so is also the productivity of the country. It depends on the people. So when the qualification, the eligibility, and the well-being of the people are at stake, you can imagine how the big impact that may have on the overall productivity of a country, for what can a sick population do for the economic development of its country. So the point is, it's not for the European and for the African leaders to promote the disruption of African countries and to leave the victims on their own, and then to turn around to order the African leaders around. Because for the past 50 years, it's been the same thing. Foreign countries have been involved in the policy and politics of African countries, and then when the disruption came, they pushed the African countries to go to elections when the foundation were not very strong, were not strong enough to go back to rebuild the country. And the United Nations has been quite instrumental in pursuing or pushing this type of behavior in the countries, in this trend in the countries. So when something like this happens, strong measure has to be taken to prevent the recurrence of this type of activity. So the biomedical consequences of war terror are the same as the exposures here. You can see range from the skin that are targeted all the way down to the other organs, including the heart, the lungs, and you name it. They are all affected as the children or the victims grow or gain in age. You will see this baby's hand here is missing a thumb. So I talked about the performance earlier. As it grows up, it would need to adapt. It would need a special treatment. It would need a special way to better cope with life. And there's a trend. They all end up with neuropsychological impairment. For instance, this woman, her face was a target. So depending on the chemical that actually got into her brain, she will be suffering from potential any of these handicaps. And the social reinsertion is the biggest problem here, because people are not able to cope and they're left on their own, and it becomes a huge problem in terms of their performance, because they can't really participate in the development of their country, and they can't take care of themselves, and so they become a ward to their country. Same thing with this young boy here, this little cute boy here. You see his face showing all these abrasions and burn, not far from his eyes, so he would have some vision problem, intellectual handicap, and again the neurodegenerative, the psychological problem, and the reinsertion. As far as his progress, it's also left to, Anyway, you see this picture here. This is the trend in Africa. This is the type of thing that happened in Rwanda. It happens in Congo. It came to now to Cote d'Ivoire. And foreign countries cannot come into our country, African countries, and kill us, trample over the rule of democracy, and then impose onto us some twisted rules of law. This has to stop, because usually these people don't kill each other just because they want to. They end up killing each other, or they're killed by an external foreign force, that wants to control the country, control the oil, control the wealth, or the policy of the country. And that's not right. This type of imported genocide have to stop, because for the past 8 years, for instance, in Cote d'Ivoire, the family of these victims have not been taken care of, and this would be a huge burden, a social burden. And it is about time that, measure taken to prevent this type of atrocity from occurring in Africa, because we can do better. A brain is too precious to be destroyed. Here are the young boys and young men of women of Cote d'Ivoire, always joyful and happy. That's a natural reaction in Cote d'Ivoire, always welcoming and And so, just as in many other countries, they're very, attached to their culture, to their flag. And they were gathering here at the Hotel d'Ivoire, which is one of the biggest hotels in Côte d'Ivoire, where the French army went to position themselves in an attempt to assassinate the president of Côte d'Ivoire. That was in November of 2004. And these young people gathered together to try to derail the assassination of the president. They didn't have any weapon with them. They just went, chanting, trying to discourage the French people who went there in full force with their army tanks and armored vehicles and snipers. And they ended up shooting some of these young boys who just were saying, no, no, we don't want it, no, no, stop, no, no, And they were killed just like that. They're living in their own country. To have a visa to go to Europe, to another country, is a whole lot of problem. You live in your country and a superpower brings in an army and kill you. And what kind of sense is that? This is the certificate of aptitude of one of the snipers. When the Ivorian army came on scene, they fled. An agreement was fine, and they fled, leaving their computers and some very crucial, critical, sensitive army information, including this. Their strategy were all laid out with the name of their targets. They had a list of so many people in Côte d'Ivoire that they were about to destroy. And they, put a bullet into the brain of this Ivorian person who was just laying down there. He was just literally butchered. What does he have to do with politics? He just didn't want his country to be destabilized. He just didn't want the president to be killed. Same thing with this young boy who was not even 11 years old. He ended up with a bullet in his body. All this because they were, attached to democracy and because they used to living a life of peace and joy. And they didn't want this to happen. If they were wrong, there shouldn't be any shooting. If they went there and the French didn't have any intention of killing the president or doing anything bad, because this is not a battleground, the Hotel d'Ivoire, they shouldn't have killed anyone. But clearly, they did have an intention of killing the president, and there were army officials from Côte d'Ivoire there. I can name a few of them. He's now a general he's a trooper of our country, one of the leaders, Hygiene was there. He's the one who negotiated this, the retrieval of the French government, of the French army. General Hygiene. They blew up the head of this young Ivorian. This is something that cannot be forgotten. This is a mark of a French savagery in the 21st century. It is unacceptable. It is unacceptable because this is an example of human degradation. It's an injustice. It is the expression of the lowliness of mankind. In this 21st century, you can't do this. This happened in the United States, my God. This happened in Europe, my God. The CIA will run after you. People will never forget this. And people will never forget this. But in Africa, it's always happened, and no one says anything. This is a group of youth who were all destroyed by the killing of their friend, and as I said, many people were shot just because they didn't want the French to carry out their wicked deed. This is deliberate butchering that will lead to a large-scale neuropsychological trauma, and people will live a troubled life down the road. Here in the United States, you can see what happened in 9/11. It is nothing of the same magnitude, But not everybody, people don't have the same threshold of resistance. And so, although 9/11 is of great magnitude, this is huge for the people who've never been exposed to this type of atrocity. So you can imagine think about the long-term effect. So we're used to France as being a land of fraternity, peace, and camaraderie, and so forth. Good manners start with good moral probity and good conscience. And then life of man is a gift from God. No one has a right to destroy it. So you can't claim to be a champion of liberty, champion of peace, and then come in someone's country and do this type of thing. Wherever Ivorian goes, they try the best to show the best behavior ever, to become the best ambassador of peace and wisdom and, good manner. And for the French people to go to Africa, and all over Africa, every time it's the same thing. They did in Rwanda, Congo, you name it. They came in the United States, came in Côte d'Ivoire, which used to be called the United States of Africa, or the Paris of Africa. They came and started this trend of destabilization, killing people. And that was in 2004. And before that, they did it in 2002. It has to stop, This is an unforgettable traumatism. And in Europe or in the United States, this type of thing happened. The judge will slap you with a heavy damage and interest. You would have to pay the damage and interest in the order of hundreds of millions of dollars per case. And they did this. No one took care of them. The UN should rather see that these crimes are, addressed, are investigated, and proper care is being given to the families and so forth, but not rush into, imposing some embargo to the country and giving them a date and a resolution saying, you can have election on such date. No one should come to our country to impose a president to any African country. Otherwise, we would never benefit from democracy. No one goes to Europe or to the United States, any other country, to impose a president. People live there. These are not animals. They are people. They know how to read. They know how to behave. So why is it that the French and the European always have to go there to Africa and to impose a president, and so as to trample over the rules of democracy? It is time that the norm of democracy be universalized, so that we can all be on the same plane and compete at the same level. But always, being through this type of situation is not helpful at all. It doesn't help in our bilateral relations. It doesn't help diplomatically. It doesn't help our economy, and it always keeps us behind. Take, for instance, the United Nations Millennium Program. Why are Africans behind? Well, it's because of the recurrent instability. It's nothing else. It's not that people are not intelligent enough to work. It's just because of this recurrent instability. Once this type of thing happens, people can't concentrate to move forward. And it is obvious they can't concentrate. This is a cheap murder caused by the French government imperialistic drive to control the policy and politics in Côte d'Ivoire. And this shouldn't happen. We are not used to this. That's why we are, opposing this type of ingerence, this type of emission, this type of activity from the French is not even unbecoming of a respectful government. And this was done by the government of Jacques Chirac, and it's being pursued by the government of Sarkozy. It's about time that people stop this, because this kind of things are not acceptable in any of the members' country of the Security Council. So care must be taken to pay up for these victims. in order to normalize our relation with the other countries, and also to maintain the peace within our countries. It is very important. You know, the time of slavery is over. The time of colonization is over. You know, people need to live their lives and live their lives happily. This young man has a future, and it's only one, but there are many out there. What sense do we give to this? This is savage, you know. So we cannot forget this and accept the French continued imposture and dictatorship. They did this in Rwanda, and they got away with it. But they can't get away with it in Côte d'Ivoire. It is just unacceptable. We just have to respect each other and value life. First and foremost, value life. Just because you are white doesn't mean that you're better than the black or the green or the yellow or the brown. We just have to respect each other. Because God created us to glorify Him. He didn't create us for us to trample over or to violate the life of the freedom of one another. Because He said He shall not be mocked. You know? So at NAMER, we know why people are behaving in such a despicable way. That's why we're offering to fix the problem. We want to fix the problem, and we need the help of the United Nations and many other stakeholders of peace and democracy and cohesion and justice to help us build the NAMER, to help us build this hospital, which will greatly help in rebuilding, giving a better future to those people who have been affected over the past 50 years. It is terrible. In the United States, there are many mental health institutions, there are elderly housing and so forth. It is a good program. They haven't been through what these people have been through, but they are being taken care of. It's about time that we transfer this technology over there to help those people so that they can be also helpful and participate in the development of their country. Because the solution to the African problems do not reside in the UN sanctions. We have to go, rather, we have to do a serious assessment of the problem, assessment of the root causes of the problem at hand, instead of just looking on the surface and always trying to impose a sanction to satisfy a certain member of the Security Council or to pave the way for a new candidate, a presidential candidate, to take over. It's like putting a bandage on someone who's bleeding. I mean, it's not solving anything. So the solution to African problems are not just the sanctions, just like we saw, the African Union, the European Union, all that gathering together to give a sanction to Côte d'Ivoire. It's not going to solve anything. Nothing. It will just dump into the problem. The chaotic problem we have in Côte d'Ivoire is due to Mr. Alassane Dramane Ouattara, who has pledged to destabilize the country of Côte d'Ivoire since 1993, when the first president of Côte d'Ivoire died. Mr. Alassane Dramane Ouattara refused to relinquish power. He was not a national of Côte d'Ivoire. He just came to help revamp the economy. But he wanted to run for president. He knew that he couldn't. And because of that, he pledged to destroy the regime of Henri Konan Bédié. He needs to be checked in a mental institution. He needs to be brought to court. And then after he's been through all this, if he's found fit enough to sit for election, to go for election, then he can pick another country where he can run for election, not Côte d'Ivoire. For two occasions. The first in 2000, first he he led Mr. Henri Konan-Bédié to leave office before return. We've never seen this before. We're not used to barbarian type of behavior like this, you know. And then after Henri Konan-Bédié left, he came back, and he did the same thing with Mr. Gbagbo, saying that he would make this country, he would turn the country into hell, he would make it ungovernable. You know, there was a warrant against him. Henri Konan-Bédié put a warrant against him because first violated the Constitution. He didn't try to wash it off. He didn't try to fight it. He rather said, I will strike your regime and you will fall. And he did it. There was a coup on December 24th of 1999. And he did again. 19th of September 2002. The rebels testified that they were getting some money from him. 25 millions of our currency while they were in Burkina Faso. They got it from Mr. Alassane Dramane Ouattara. You know, there are safety nets in other countries against infringement to peace and democracy. Let's say, for instance, in the United States, the president has a national security advisor, he has the justice system, defense, and for our purpose, we have a human and social services. Whenever there is a threat, all the security systems are, you know, put on alert. The FBI, the CIA, the municipal police, the sheriff office, the State Department, I mean the state troopers, all are, you know, engaged to collect the information for the purpose of bringing the culprit to court. If it's a problem, a mental problem, the human and social services can engage the troopers, the sheriff office, or the FBI to help gather the information. And if a person is mentally deranged, as I see Mr. Alassane Dramane is for having made so much threat, then the human and social services bring the person to the hospital for an evaluation, and after he went through the evaluation, then he can go to trial. You know, these safety nets are very important. That's why I like the American system, because if you do something, you know, it is all logged in, and whenever you want to run for president or for office, they bring it back. They bring it up. And because of this well-orchestrated, well-organized, you know, buffering system, people know where to put their feet. They know what to do. They know what not to do. So you don't just make threats. So anybody who's involved in a threat or a plot against the state, that person is run after by the FBI. It's not the case in Cote d'Ivoire. It's not the case in Africa. It's about time the United Nations makes that difference. That whosoever has done anything against the stability of the country cannot be given, you know, this privilege to run the country or to even, you know, postulate as a candidate. And so we say that, you know, this leads us to the biological origin of war terror. We believe that those who engage into the destabilization of any country or any type of awkward behavior have some mental problem. That's what we're saying. And I'm going to try to explain to you briefly. In every body, in every cell, takes place this sequence of events. The genes are transcribed, and then they lead to a synthesis of protein to give rise to an active protein. It's more complicated, but for our purpose, we'll go faster. So the active protein here may be active, but it may not be fully functional due to the fact that maybe the person, the cell here has been affected by some exogenous products such as drugs, alcohol, narcotics, and so forth, or by some physiological impairments or abnormalities. When that happens, the protein, the nascent protein here, may not be fully functional. So the physical chemical aspect of a protein may vary based on the way the protein folds, based on the elements involved in the synthesis of the protein. So if it's an enzyme, for instance, the enzyme may not catalyze, may not work fully as an enzyme because of the impairments, or because of the way it folds, or because of the different modifications that took place at the end of the translation of the protein. We have here the brain of an individual. This is a MRI picture. And you have here a cannabis, which is a potent drug in the order of marijuana and hashish and so forth. Some people take it to enhance to boost their stamina, or to fight fear, or for many other reasons. Bottom line is that those chemicals can have an adverse effect on the brain. Alcohol, cigarette, or whatever they put in it, coffee or other drinks, the drugs, can all have a negative effect on on the brain. So to the point where those who are intoxicated do not think right anymore, and this can be passed on to their offsprings. So I talked about the biological mechanism that takes place here. It can be transferred to the offspring. So for instance, if it's a protein, an enzyme, the enzyme may not function, the catalysis may not be optimal anymore as a result of a modification that took place during the synthesis of the protein here. The activation energy here may be higher or lower, affecting the rate of reaction of the enzyme. And all this can be seen through the X-ray crystallography of the protein. So what do we want to do at the NAMER? At the NAMER, we want to engage into research, provide treatment service, counseling, education, training, and other solutions. Why? Because once someone has been through a war, there are many consequences, as I talked about earlier. The biological consequences, the targets that we talked earlier, which we saw earlier, and the social and economical consequences. In the United States, you have a VA, Veteran Affairs, which is like a ministry in the United States that takes care of those who have been on the battlefield, because it's a serious matter. In Africa, you don't have such a thing. So those who were not enlisted with an army are traumatized, and the fighters also are traumatized. So you can imagine the fighters are not well trained to go to fight, and the civilians who are not even into the battle or engaged into the battle are also suffering tenfold. And so there is no infrastructure there to help them adapt, cope, or redirect their lives. So at the NAMER, we would like to provide these services that I just mentioned, counseling, education, research, treatment, because this problem can last a long time, can have a long-lasting effect. The simple example of the VA service in the United States is very informative. How people are followed over time. They have a special purse. It is meant to help those who have been traumatized live a better life. and we should have that in Africa, especially given the fact that people do not choose to go to war, they're just victims. 80% of them are victims, and some of them are youth who even didn't start going to school, as I showed you, with babies. And some of them are elderly who probably didn't have a chance to enjoy the last moment of their lives on Earth. So from an epidemiological standpoint, we would like to do some research as to to find out the number of people who have been affected. So we ask ourselves a basic epidemiological questionnaires, who is ill, why, what is the origin of their illness, of their illnesses, what type of illnesses are they suffering from, how many are there, what is the duration of their illness, because for some reason, let's say for instance in Nigeria, in the 60s, in the 70s, there was a Biafra war. What was done for them? Now we are in 2010, and the same thing is happening in Côte d'Ivoire. Later we find out that people have a different way of thinking, they become violent, the society becomes, difficult to manage, and we are worried about, we don't know what to do. Well, we have to do what works in America and everywhere else for those who have been exposed to war. So we ask ourselves, who is ill? What is the age bracket of those who are ill? Their gender, their occupation, their addresses, their ethnicity, their villages. We can throw in more parameters so as to do a mapping, demographic mapping of the population. This also can help locate the people and assign them an ID, because that's another problem in Africa. People don't have IDs, and it's difficult to give them an address also. So another advantage is in our quest to find out more about the distribution of the disease, the place of birth of the people, the environment does have an effect, the way, their education, and all this information can help us, prevent people from becoming delinquent or to have a better idea about the etiology of their disease. Some of them may be intoxicated, some of them may be terrorized, violence, victim of violence, rape, secondary effect. Some of them may be delinquent. And the type of illnesses, I'll take the extreme, which is the subject of our discussion today. Some of them may be so excessive, so prone to violence, robbery, lies, distraction, high sensitivity, to the point where they will even refuse to acknowledge that they're wrong when they are wrong, which is the case in most of the case with the rebels. They'll take your car, they think it's theirs, and you can't take that out of their mind. All this because at the enzymatic level, there's been some changes as a result of their consumption of drugs and so forth, or because of the modification that took place. The active site is no longer receptive to the substrate, or the substrate is competing with some of the drug that they're taking, or some of the alcohol or other chemical, or it is just a natural modification of the function of their enzyme, owing to the modifications that may take place as a result of the protein synthesis. We know that the mitochondria are involved in the energy production, so it is center for cellular energy production. So if the mitochondria doesn't work very well, it can lead to many neurodegenerative diseases, and in the case of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, and so forth. So it's very important for the cytochrome C that are in the mitochondria to function optimally in order to promote the generation of the energy needed for the cell to function well. As I said, if a protein is modified or if it's hindered, the rate of catalysis may vary, and that can have a negative adverse effect on brain function, on heart function, on many other organs function. So it is very important for people to be healthy by, having a normal way of life and a normal thinking pattern, and not being under stress all the time, because believe it or not, the rebels are under stress all the time. This is the G proteins, transmembrane. Some of them may not be methylated at the end of the synthesis. They are usually receptors. So if they are pharmacological receptors and they are not functional, well, you can imagine someone who is taking a drug to get well. The drug cannot attach to the receptor, so it would probably think that it's because the dose is not right. So he takes more, and then he ends up with with a complicated situation. You have, for instance, here the synapses that are the point of transfer of the neurotransmitters. If the neurotransmitters are not moving appropriately, well, you may end up with a chemical imbalance in the brain that can lead to one's inability to process information correctly, or many other inability to remember. So these effects here are all involved in the well-being of an individual and the normal functioning of the brain, which is something that we don't usually see in the gangsters because of the way they think. They don't think that they're right. They don't think that they're wrong. They always think that they're right. They can take your car and believe that it's okay for them to do it. And if you resist, then they shoot you. They can put a roadblock on the major road, collecting money fraudulently, or taking false taxes, or raping people, and they think it's okay. And the UN, instead of looking into the biological aspect of their behavior, the UN usually goes and sign with them, make a resolution. Okay, a group of rebels, now you can deal with the president, or president, you can step down, or make an arrangement. This doesn't solve the problem. You're dealing with outlaws. Outlaws are people who knows, for instance, that hey, this place here is blue, but they don't want to call it blue. The blue frame, they say that it's orange. They have a twisted mind, so they have to be corrected. With counseling, drugs, or whatever. So we would like to use those diagnostic and molecular mechanism tools to carry out this testing. Enzymology, endocrinology. Some people may not have some molecular abnormality, they just have a bad behavior. Behavior has been confounded by or induced by the environment. They end up with psychosomatic symptoms. Neurological problems, many of them end up with that, and it becomes a way of life. Psychiatric problems becomes a way of life. Some of them are suffering from cancer, and we know that cancer can modify the way of thinking of an individual. Cell death happening all the time, even in a normal person, how much more in a person who is suffering from cancer that has not been detected, can have a very serious adverse effect on an individual. If it attacks the brain, then it's even worse. So And we know that environmental pollution can have also some negative effect on the hormonal system. So the endocrine system is also at risk when people are at war or when they are ingesting those chemicals. So the hormonal system becomes a target, and it can be passed on to the offspring also. So our targets here are, for our clinical testing would be DNA, protein, mitochondria, as I explained to you earlier, neurotransmitters. We will also check them to see if there's no chemical imbalance, enzyme kinetics. They are all standard laboratory testing. And another thing that is very important to me is that it is important to do a pharmacological profile of these people. Instead of rushing into, sitting on the table to sign a deal. When they see the money, then they're happy. But as soon as the money is depleted, they change again. So it's better to do a pharmacological profiling to see if the leader that you have faced, facing you, is not drugged, or is he okay? Is it normal? Even the president, But those people go out there, they kill people for just a small reason, and the United Nations and the French and the other stakeholders of democracy sign a deal with them. You can give all the money to someone who has a twisted mind, who's sick, it will never resolve the problem. So these equipment and testing and so forth are very expensive. The MRI, for instance, can go up to $1 million. The positron electron tomography machine, the CAT scan, all that are very expensive machinery for the laboratory. But if we are to preserve peace and democracy, if we are to preserve solidarity and justice, it would be best to invest here rather than giving the money to some people who have shown their irresponsibility, their inability to think and to act right. And we better to invest it here, because this investment will not only help the victims, but it will also help those who claim to be in great health enough to manage an entire country. In the United States, to get a job, you have to sometimes go through a screening, drug screening. And that drug screening can show so many things. And it will be helpful for the employee and as well as for the employer. The mass spectrometer, DNA sequencer, microscope, PCR, NMR, and other equipment as well as the reagents are very expensive, but they are useful. That's what is being used in the United States. That's what is being used in Europe. It's about time that we transfer this basic technology over there in Africa, where people have been subjected to so many problems that led to the onset of very deleterious health conditions. And these health conditions need to be managed if we are to look at the biggest picture, which is the development of Africa, which is peace in the region, which is the well-being and a better civilization. Otherwise, what's the point of having UNICEF, the World Health Organization, UNDP, and all these UN organizations that are geared toward the preservation of life and the betterment of life? What's the point of having UNESCO? The point is not just to throw in some bag of rice to people who are suffering. No, they're suffering for something much deeper than hunger. Even you can give them some food to eat, but if their system is not functioning well, they can ingest all kind of food they want, but they will not. They will all still be malnourished. So the advantages of NIMER would be, to provide educational training and solution, to say no to barbarian behavior and to vandalism, and yes to respect of the law and public property. Once you have this basic knowledge of civism, then you would know your limits, and you would know to wait for your time, and stay away from this type of barbarian activities. We intend to offer laboratory technology training for the students, because usually people don't know what to do after they finish high school or after they finish college. Well, our services will offer them an opportunity to have a degree or a certificate in bio or psychoengineering in citizens, so that they can work with the law enforcement agents, justice system, the police, and so forth, to help preserve the well-being of the people. Solidarity, peace, justice, they're all important, and it's about time that people get involved with a training. So this is an additional service that we intend to provide, in addition to the basic medical service. We would like to provide them with counseling, education, training, and other solutions to the problem inherent to their exposure to war. And some of them have been affected for many years, and nothing has been done. So NIEMA, for instance, in Côte d'Ivoire, will have one major site and 5 different satellite institutes, just like the United States NIH. So that's 10,000 specialized jobs, 150,000 full-time employees, all that to provide a unified and solid, peaceful community. This is our badge for our future students, future graduates. There will be specialists of justice, democracy, and peace. There will be specialists of solidarity and cohesion, and so as to get people involved into wellness, into the notion of togetherness, as opposed to always promote division, promote fear, and give a chance to some rebel to bring in some youth to carry out the deed of some wicked politician. It's about time that those youth are putting on the right track to provide them with a better future, and the NEMAR would help do that. So with NEMAR, African will gain some very strong and large wings, and Africa will gain in speed as far as its productivity, as far as its ability to move forward toward development, measurable development. Africa will be more competitive at the international level, and many Africans will be involved in the betterment of life and preservation of civilization. There are so many things to be done in many areas, as well as environment, medical science, and so forth. People need peace of mind to be able to do that. So with NEMAR, it will be saving the lives of people by the million. Now, to close, this is what I call the main problem of Africa, a problem that the United Nations should spend time solving, as far as Africa is concerned. I mean, if I was the Secretary General of the United Nations, I would spend 60% of my time trying to resolve this problem on the issue pertaining to Africa, because this type of violence is not needed. It's not helpful to push the agenda of Africa towards development. So what is the cause, the root cause of this? What needs to be done? And and how is it measured. You know, so people who are really, you know, who really care for the welfare of the people of Africa, people who care for mankind, should not neglect this. They should see, and I'm calling on, you know, all the philanthropists and all the decision makers and business owners and, you know, politicians and so forth, even the private individual who would like to chip in, deep into your heart and show some compassion and help us build, you know, this is the future direction that we would like to give to Africa, and it's important that we create the NEMAR that would help canalize the effort toward peace, toward democracy, toward the preservation of justice. It is very important that we do that, because if we don't, the problem will remain, and you know, another race, another civilization will be extinguished. Is it what the United States or the European Union or the United Nations wants? I don't think so. So the European cannot come to Africa and kill us and force us to accept the imposture and the dictatorship that they used to, you know, to bring into Africa. You know, we have to respect each other. It is very important that we do so. We have to value life. It is very important that we do so, because yes, I'm a man of God, and I know that what goes around comes around. And when you do that to people, God will pay to you in another way. It will bring a disaster, you know, of a greater magnitude to your country. You know, it could be a plague, it could be an epidemic, it could be an environmental disaster, it could be anything. So, you know, let's not, you know, let's not challenge God, because no one can stand his wrath. You know, so if we can do something in this life, something positive, let's do it, as opposed to just threatening other countries, threatening to destabilize countries because of greed and selfish ambitions, just like what Mr. Alassane Ouattara did. He lives in the United States for a long time. He knows that you don't make that kind of threats. You know, I lived in the United States for over 20 years. I know that there are certain things that I can do, there are certain things that I cannot do. I cannot be president of the United States. I cannot be, because I do not fulfill the requirements. Same thing, Mr. Alassane Ouattara should have understood that instead of activating his people to put the pressure on Cote d'Ivoire and to lead to this type of murder, just because he wants to run the country so that he can split the money. It doesn't make sense. So, NEMAR is 10,000 specialized jobs, 150 full-time employees, to provide a unified and peaceful society, you know, for the preservation of justice, democracy, and peace. NEMAR is research, training, counseling, education, solution, for the preservation of unity, solidarity, and cohesion. It's an effort in support of the National Reconciliation Program and the African Institute for Epidemiological and Mental Hygiene Research would be a way to solve many problems related to previous war casualties, as well as the preservation of a better life for the next generation. And I hope that Mr. Alassane Ouattara and the type of people like that will understand that they better adopt a better behavior. We've seen people like Charles Taylor, Mobutu, Saddam Hussein, who were very vicious, very mean. They didn't realize that they were mean, but the world let them lead some countries, and we know what happened. I think Mr. Alassane Ouattara falls into that category because he has shown a consistent trend of violence, violent behavior, a lack of respect for the Constitution of Côte d'Ivoire, lack of respect for human life. You may have some professional qualities, but if your moral qualities or your mental status are not aligned, then you are not a good leader. If you don't fear God to a point where to reach your goal, you can kill, you can breed a group of terrorists to kill, then you cannot be a good leader. A good leader must be a blend of many things. Not just be pushed by your selfish ambition, your blind ambition to become president at all price. I hope that this message is understood, and that the United Nations, the European Union, the African Union, and every other person understand the scope of this message and help Côte d'Ivoire regain its stature in the world as before. Thank you very much, and may God bless you.